gosh, y'all, it has been forever. Welcome to another episode of Next to the Floor. My name is Harrison. I will be your host with the most. How's it going? I am joined by the ever incomparable, the indefatigable Gary Noxterry. Hello, my friend.
Whoa.
How are you today?
Whoa. I'm doing good. It's nice outside.
I know.
Sun's out, guns out.
Oh, crap. Sorry. Woo.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Right?
Blowing up my phone.
Sun's out, guns out.
Sun's out, guns are out. That is a fact. It is a hot one here in the city of Boston. It's probably a hot one in the city of everywhere else as well. Not gonna lie. What have you been doing to, what's the word? Stay cool, enjoy the weather, etc.
By sweating my butt off dancing. Yeah, I haven't actually been trying to keep cool. This is probably the only times this weekend where I sat down in the air conditioned because I've been out dancing, because stuff has opened up,
Oh, that's right.
And,
You and Marcy went out dancing last night, right? Or not last night, but
not last night, but the night.
But the other night, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How was that?
It was good. It was good, and it was definitely hot. I don't think the air conditioning was working at all. It's like 80. It was like 80 degrees at night, and I felt like 90 degrees inside the building. So,
because you went to Havana Club, right?
Sweat everywhere. Yeah, it was
Havana Club. God.
Yeah.
I remember one time I went there. Oh, well, I think you were there with me. It was my birthday a couple years ago, and I just remember it being like steaming for absolutely no reason. I mean, there was a good reason because there were about like 20,000 people in there, but
yeah, it's crazy. A lot. Remember how many people we used to pack in the rooms, and now it's just like, oh, all of a sudden back to it.
Right. Well, it's nice to know that the world is returning to some semblance of normalcy. Some semblance.
Vaccinate your kids.
Oh my God. Honestly, y'all, please. It takes, well, I would say it takes 30 seconds. It takes about a month and a half. But just go out and get vaccinated. I was looking at a report earlier today. And believe it or not, the U.S. is actually doing fairly well, all things considered. Hold on. I know we are at 42 as of right now. I'm looking at this on the Google. We are at 42.1% of the population fully vaccinated, which is great.
There you go.
That's fully vaccinated.
Wait, what did you say?
So.
And what was the number again?
It was 42% of the population is fully vaccinated. But
we need to get those numbers up there. We still need to get those numbers up there. Only
in the US at the moment, it's 51.9% have had at least their first dose of the vaccine. But if we look at like individual state data, individual state data is a lot better. So like the state of Massachusetts killing the game as of
there we go.
Right? As of number 1, aren't we? Today, I think it says, I don't actually know where this number is coming from. However, I think it's coming from the CDC. but 55.9% of Massachusetts is fully vaccinated, which is awesome. And then we have, I think we're up to like 80% of Massachusetts has had at least their first dose.
Is there like a place? Are we in like a place? Are we like third place or first or second? I really want to know if we're
Um,
winning.
there's probably, uh, yes, in first place currently with the number with 57.83% of the total population fully vaccinated is
No,
Vermont.
start from three. Wait, start. Wait. Start from three. Start from
Oh, start from
three,
three.
and
Okay,
then do
three and then
two,
work up.
one. Like,
Okay, so number three is
yeah. Okay.
Massachusetts, sitting at an easy 54.
Okay. Third.
Yep. And then Maine is number two, 55.82%. And then Vermont is sitting at number one, 57.83%.
The Northeast.
And then, shocking to absolutely nobody, Mississippi is currently sitting at 51st,
Yep.
with just 27.49% of the population. And then it is shocking to no one, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Wyoming, Tennessee, Utah, Georgia, Idaho, Oklahoma. Basically, if your state went for DJT this last election, you have, I'm pretty sure, less than like 50% of your, or at least less than 40% of your population vaccinated, and you're garbage. So,
Is that what is that? I think we call that something like natural selection.
is that what?
Is that like natural selection?
Um, I don't know if it's natural selection so much as it is, you know, um, about a full year's worth of propagandizing coming full circle. I was watching, so, I'm always very wary about the various like news sources or sources where I get my news from. But I've recently been watching. There's he's a, I don't even know. He's like a news source. I'll just call him a news source. His name is David Pakman. He has a show on YouTube called The David Pakman Show. It's very, very informative. He's very well educated on a lot of current issues, has a very kind of like logical approach to his understanding of the world. And he had a what's the word I'm looking for? He had a on episode the other day. He said that basically, if you want to see the areas of the country where people are more likely to be vaccinated, all you have to do is look at a map of the population for like the voting population, um, and look at like exit poll data to see what areas of the country are more likely to be vaccinated. And the two maps of like vaccinations or people who have been vaccinated versus people who haven't, and then that is versus the people who have voted Biden versus Donald J. Trump. They're basically the exact same map, just overlaid on top of each other. Shocking.
Yep. Shocking.
Shocking, I know. But that's what you get for a full year's worth of disinformation. And um
A lot of Trump supporters are like, they're starting to have epiphanies, and then they're like, "Oh no, like it was the disinformation, and it was, Trump made me run into the Capitol," which is true. But
I mean, there is some validity there, but at some point, you've got to take some ownership of your own actions. At some point.
or like find credible sources. But I guess it's the president of the United States. I mean, I guess everything what he says comes is true, comes out of his mouth. So
I mean, I guess, but I think well, this is not brand new information, but one of the major, more larger issues was that, he was kind of elevated to this like godhood status for literally no reason. Well, there's very good reason in there. Um, something about the, you know, uh,
let's say that a lot of people had a lot in common with him,
let's just say a lot of people had a lot of
and
problems with a lot of certain people had a lot of problems with the let's say the physical attributes of a particular president that came just before, and therefore decided to vote in this guy because he tells it like it is or whatever.
or whatever.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. I think the stage that we're in right now, unfortunately, is like trying to figure out how do we deprogram a lot of these kind of rabid Trump supporters. Um, and I use the word rabid because that's effectively. I'm using the word rabid because it's a disease,
Yeah.
and
No.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
will.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't care who hears it. It's a disease. We've got a problem, and its name was Donald J. Trump and or racism. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So we were started on the topic of vaccinations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I saw an article earlier this week, and actually one of our viewers, Jim, earlier this week, uh, sent me an article about the NFL. Who there's a whole thing in there that I could. There's a whole lot of stuff that we can unpack with the NFL. It's going to be a multi-episode arc, I think. But they
Yeah.
recently
Mm-hmm.
just ended a practice. They've agreed to end the practice of race norming when it comes to claims like insurance claims for concussions and the like. So, for those of you who don't know what race norming is, the basically it is the concept that when you normalize the races that when you normalize the races that black people tend to have lesser cognitive function than white people. So I'm just going to throw that one into the universe. I'm going to let it kind of like float there. Let it
And like, wait, so because I was like skimming, I was reading the article, and like it had something to do with tests too. Like, can you explain it a little bit more?
Yeah. Okay. So the concept of race norming. So I'm going to read it. This is from another article because I had to do a little bit of digging to get a true definition of what it is. But this article says that that race norming was imposed, of course, it was imposed with the best of intentions to help combat discrimination. The fact that conservatives pressure led the George Bush outlawing the practice in 1991 only strengthened its attraction for liberals. But the idea of assessing individuals
Civil
different,
Rights Act.
yeah, but the idea of assessing individuals differently by virtue of the racial group to which they are deemed to belong is necessarily rooted in racist views of group differences. When they use a different scale for African Americans versus any other race, that is literally the definition of systemic racism. But, so basically, in order to kind of better assess the situation, they grouped all black people and all white people and said that, black people are less likely to experience the effects of concussion because they are cognitively lesser than their white peers.
Wow.
But the irony of this
Wow.
whole entire situation, and this is where it gets most interesting, is the irony of the whole situation is that it was used as an anti-racist measure and part of like an affirmative action program in order to like basically, I know you want to talk about some white liberal nonsense.
How do you even just like you just how do you who thought of that? No, we'll just say it's not, you know?
Well, so the
Like that's crazy. And so now they're saying, "Oh, we're not doing it any we're not doing it
we're not going
anymore."
to use it anymore. But
But then
so
like they don't want to admit that we're not going to use it anymore.
yep. But the thing, so
But
the
then
article further says here, like in that 1980s, or in 1980, the U.S. Department of Labor pressured employers to adjust aptitude test scores to improve the performance of black people who often did worse than white people. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission threatened to sue companies not adopting such race norming. Racial adjustments also became widely used in medical diagnoses. So basically, you know, without looking at the extenuating factors that normally lead to underperformance in people. So there's going to be a whole lot to unpack here, people. So buckle in because there's a lot going on. So when we look at all of the things that go into success, I'm going to talk about this from the context of like the difference between like inner city schooling versus urban versus suburban schooling, and why suburban students tend to achieve better than urban students, i.e. black students versus white students. Because in black
hmm,
schools, typically primarily black schools, a lot of the urban setting doesn't provide for the safety that students or children need in order to be successful in school. So one of the main things that prevent students from succeeding or excelling in class is access to stable food, shelter, and water. All of the three main things that the WHO and the UN and everybody
that
says that we need.
human
Yeah,
that classified as a human right, but some reason like the United States doesn't classify it as a human right.
correct. So when you're in these
Those things.
situations where you have by and large swaths of the population who don't have access easy or don't have affordable or easy access to quality food. Look at situations like Washington, D.C., where the primarily black neighborhoods are considered what are known as food deserts, where the nearest like cheap grocery store where you can buy fresh produce and things along those lines is not easily accessible by public transportation or car. I think there is, I will look up here really quickly the definition of a food desert, but I'm pretty sure it's got to be like one grocery store food desert. I think it's like one grocery store within a like
East Boston's a food
15
desert.
square
That's why
mile.
they're so. Yeah, I think that East Boston is actually a food desert. That's why there's so many like little shops and stuff.
Yep.
But there's only one grocery store per. I think it's per capita. Like I'm
Yeah.
not sure what's the number, but
But so it is a food area. A food desert is an area that has limited access to affordable and nutritious food. So the food deserts tend to be inhabited by low-income residents with reduced mobility. This makes them less attractive market for large supermarket chains. They tend to be more than 10-mile. Most, let's see. It's reported that 23.5 million people in the U.S. live in food deserts, meaning that they live more than 1 mile from a supermarket in urban or suburban areas and more than 10 miles from supermarket in rural areas. So as long as, like, if you look at the landscape of a lot of inner cities, especially like in the predominantly black cities, there isn't access to grocery stores where you can buy adequate food, healthy food. That is one of the main things that children need to grow. You look at cities like Flint, Michigan, where they're still to this day dealing with lead in their water. It has been almost a decade
yeah, forever. Yeah,
since this has made national news. Almost a decade. So they don't have access to water. And then you've got like the rate of homelessness in inner city youth, and the influence of like poverty and generational poverty that make things such as learning a near impossibility when kids are worried about where they're going to sleep that evening, or domestic issues at home. So when you ignore all of those extenuating factors, circling back, right, when you ignore all of those extenuating factors, it is pretty easy to look at a group of black urban children who are underperforming in school and their white counterparts in a suburban area that aren't living in a food desert, that do have access to clean water and more regular or consistent shelter, right? And it's easy to say black people perform less well than white people just across the board. But it is also very easy to, in ignoring all of those extenuating circumstances, right? It is very easy to kind of jump to that next level or next idea and say like, oh, it's not because of all of those extra things. Look at all of these other factors. Like, they have access to food, there's running water, they live in a house, or they can sleep somewhere. It must be from a cognitive standpoint. And that mentality has been kind of pervasive throughout all of American history towards black people.
yeah. American history starting with like slavery.
Mm-hmm.
We were unintelligent because like we weren't being taught English at all,
Correct.
until very late in the game. So, but the thing is, they use that to classify us as like stupid, you know?
Oh, of course.
They
And
kept us dumb.
it is and the idea of like cognitive difference in black people versus white people, it extends even to, well, it's not even just like cognitive differences. It's I've got another article that I pulled up because as soon as I knew that we were going to talk about this, I was like, oh, that makes me think of they did a recently they did a study of kind of like practices within a lot of hospitals, and it's not brand new information to the world, I guess, but it's brand new information to the world, that for the longest time that the belief was that Black people experience pain to a lesser degree than their white peers. And there have been many studies about the consequence of racial bias in medicine. But by and large, when you look at like the number of the infant mortality rate or the maternal mortality rate, it overwhelmingly affects people of color a lot more, and that's because of racial bias within the medical field, where women of color tend to either be completely misdiagnosed, or have their pain and symptoms ignored because of this concept that Black people don't experience pain to the same degree or to the same level as their white peers. What does it say? Hold on. Oh man. There was one part in here, oh, okay. This research has shown that people assume a priori, that is before, without any information, that Blacks feel less pain than do whites. In a study by Staten et al., for instance, patients were asked to report how much pain they were experiencing, and physicians were asked to rate how much pain they thought the patients were experiencing. Physicians were more likely to underestimate the pain of Black patients, 47%, relative to non-Black patients, 33.5%. Of note, this research has also shown that racial attitudes measured both implicitly and explicitly do not predict racial bias in pain perception or treatment, with the exception of one study showing that implicit pro-white attitudes predicted physicians' likelihood of recommending thrombolysis treatment, period.
But in that set, you could have somebody just sitting there and saying like, "Oh, nah, he can't feel it. He's good," because you notice it said the physicians whether or not they thought they were in pain or
Right.
not.
And so
So how many of those physicians are just like,
and so the important thing to note here, right, and this article goes on to explain it, and this is, I think, and all viewers at home, like, sit down, listen up, because when we collectively, Black people, world, talk about the concept of systemic racism, and that like racism as a construct and as a system needs to be dismantled from the inside out, and that yes, we know that white people aren't all inherent or aren't all racist, but that we participate in racist systems. This is what we mean. So it goes on to say that according to these studies, racial bias and perception of pain and possibly treatment does not appear to be born out of racist attitudes. In other words, it is likely not the result of racist individuals acting in racist ways, period. It is systemic in the sense that a lot of these behaviors are taught, and actually there are, like, in a lot of the big textbooks that were, and I think things are changing a bit now, fortunately, but a lot of the major textbooks actually talk about like pain relative to Black people and non-Black people, and that there have been a couple of textbooks that explicitly say that Black people do not experience pain at the same rates or as intensely as white people. So it's not that you're like, as they say, it's not that that, you know, white doctors or doctors in general are out there saying like, oh, black, you know, they're not actively being racist, right? You don't have to put on a hood to say these things. It's just that, like, if this is built into the system, like if you have racism built into the system, then that is the problem.
I think there's a word for that.
Systemic racism? Is that the
Yeah,
word?
yeah, louder for the.
Oh, did I get it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you
winner,
got it,
winner.
yeah.
Chicken dinner.
Chicken dinner.
So, okay, hold on. We're gonna take a quick pause because not like super huge announcements or anything, but I wanted to let everybody know that next to the floor, this thing right here, look at this fun little thing, is hashtag not sponsored today by the Trevor Project and the Trevor Project Challenge. As many of you know, June is Pride Month here in the United States, which is really, I mean, that means a lot to me. You know, I'm a member of the LGBT community. So I figured what better way to do good for the world and continue doing good than to support the Trevor Project. As you all know, the Trevor Project was founded in, or maybe or may not know, it was founded in 1998 by the creators of the Academy Award-winning short film Trevor, which was a film about a kid basically, you know, he committed suicide after being bullied for being gay. And it is the leading national organization providing crisis intervention and suicide prevention services to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people under 25. If you want to support the Trevor Project, which you should, if you don't want to support them, I don't know why you're here watching this. So, but if you want to support them, head over to trevorproject.org. That is the trevorproject.org. The link is in the description and the bio. But make sure you head over there and throw some money that way, you know, because as much as we want to think about the LGBT community as kind of like its own monolithic thing, as you may or may not know, a lot of these communities, whether it's the Black community or the, you know, the female community.
Yeah. I guess so.
But they all, as do most things in the world, intersect. And you can't have Black liberation without LGBT liberation, without women's liberation. So make sure you head over to the trevorproject.org and provide a little bit of money, donation, time. You can volunteer, what have you, but do what you can to make the world a better place. And also just go get vaccinated. Like, hello.
Go get off the couch, go get vaccinated.
It's really easy.
Do it. Get your kids vaccinated.
Get your kids vaccinated. Those little nasties. Get them vaccinated. And then just be responsible. Just because things are open and you can wear a mask, you don't have to wear a mask some places, doesn't mean you shouldn't be wearing a mask. But that's a whole nother conversation. That's just, you know, people just need to be responsible.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to wear the mask on the T for quite some time.
Well,
now.
You know, we're legally required
long time
to wear it on the T. But
yeah.
I, for the rest of my life, will not wear a mask on the T.
Pretty much the rest of my life.
Yeah, especially after seeing some of the nonsense that I've seen over the last couple of weeks. Now that the world is opening back up, there's some nonsense and shenanigans happening on this public transportation that needs to be addressed, not by me, by literally anybody else. But God
Yeah, keep your
Almighty,
faces to yourself, please.
yes,
Keep
and
your faces
you've
to
got this
yourself.
entire train and you want to sit right next to me. Like the entire train. The entire train. It's empty. And you have to sit right up in my business without your mask on. People just get me heated
Yeah.
for no reason. Well, good reason. Mouth breathers. Anywho, so I wanted to touch on, speaking of before we get back, I should probably drop a plug for our Patreon, because we have a Patreon. So if you want to support our stream in this endeavor and all of this great stuff that we're doing, head over to patreon.com, patreon.com/next to the floor. If you look at all of these social media things down here, next to the floor, next to the floor, next to the floor, it is next to the number 2, the floor. So patreon.com/next to the floor, and help support us. Thank you to all of our current Patreon sponsors. And Marcy? Really? Is Marcy right there? Oh, you were just pointing.
No, I was just pointing. I was
Understood. I just got so excited. Tell Marcy I say hello. But I was Patreon. Oh, hi Marcy. Oh, she's in the chat. Marcy's in the chat, everyone.
She's in the chat, everybody.
Marcy's in the chat. Marcy has entered the chat. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. We'll be in New Orleans next week.
Yeah, we'll be in New Orleans.
I'm very
next
excited.
Week. Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna
taking a little dancecation.
Taking a little dancecation. I'm gonna bring down. I'm gonna pretty much film things on my phone and then put together a little mini compilation dealio. And then who knows, if you are subscribed to our Patreon, you might see a little of myself and Gary dancing, because that's what we do. So make sure you head over to our Patreon next week and take a look at. You might even see Steven. Ooh. Y'all remember one of our recurring guests, Steven, might make an appearance. But oh man, I was gonna talk about another thing, but we're pretty much like out of time. We're like out of time for today's episode.
It does look like we're out of time.
I know. It all happened so fast. So yeah, okay, so let's wrap this guy up. So yeah, make sure you get vaccinated. Remember, systemic racism means that the system is racist. You can be overtly racist and, do that, I guess. Or you can participate in a racist system and not do anything to dismantle it, such as, believing that and perpetuating the notion that Black people experience pain to a lesser degree or are cognitively less developed than their white counterparts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically the moral of the story is, the system is rotten, the tree is rotten, and is producing rotten fruit. But with that, thank you all so much for tuning in today to Next to the Floor. You've all been fantastic. Make sure you check out the Trevor Project at thetrevorproject.org. The more you know, the more you know. Check out the Trevor Project at thetrevorproject.org. Super incredible organization. And help us out with supporting the stream. Join us at Patreon. Become a Patreon. Patreon.com/next to the floor. All of our socials are right here. Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. Just type in that after patreon.com. The link for that is also in the description box below this. And I'm going to ask a quick question. I'm just going to leave us on this one. Gary, you got a 30-second answer. Depending, I guess, of course, depending on the situation, do the ends justify the means?
Depending on the situation, do the ends justify the means?
Yes. Think on it, and we'll check you out.
Yes.
Next episode of Next to the Floor. I figured I would just leave
Next
you with that one.
episode.
Next episode, stay tuned for our next episode of Next to the Floor. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Oh my gosh, I just realized our next episode is basically going to be a Juneteenth celebration. So, because it's the day after Juneteenth.
It actually is.
So we need to blow this one up out of the water. So we'll check you out on this next episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and we'll see you in the coming weeks. Goodbye.
Bye. Woo!